Next on the program is Lynn Castrianno, who lost a brother when the World Trade Centers collapsed. We've had her a couple of times on our program, and she's literally back by popular demand because her story is so compelling. Lynn?
Thank you. Before I begin, I just want to thank the City of Lincoln and the park here for remembering September 11th, not just on the 10-year anniversary, but every year for the past 9 years. It has just been an incredible tribute to the city for that remembrance. Ten years. It's hard to believe that so many years have gone by. 10 years ago today, my world turned upside down, and I've struggled with both a personal and a national tragedy. My brother Leonard worked in the North Tower in the 105th floor. This is the first tower to be hit and the second to fall. Leonard worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, which is the organization that lost 658 employees. No one from above the 90th floor was able to get out of the building due to the debris and the fires in the 3 stairwells that would have led to safety. Today, I'd like to take you on a condensed journey of the past 10 years as we've tried to come to terms with this horrific event. 10 years ago today, I watched the events that took my brother's life. On that day, I lost not only a brother, but a friend. There is a void in my life that can't be repaired. When I think back to that day, my mind immediately goes to the terror that must have been felt by people like you and me that simply went to work that day. Those that worked in an office at the Pentagon or at the World Trade Center. Those who were flight attendants and pilots, businessmen and women flying to their business connections, police, fire, and rescue personnel, and vacationers flying home or to their destinations. That day has certain images ingrained in my memory. I remember watching a TV someone brought into work and standing against the cubicle wall as the second tower fell. That was my brother's tower. I watched the building shudder and tremble and implode upon itself. As the building fell, I felt myself sliding against the wall until I was on the floor. My brain couldn't keep up with the awful image I had just seen. My coworkers were watching the TV, and me, and although no one said it aloud, you could hear the question hanging in the air. Where was my brother? Was he dead, or did he survive? Was he able to get out? Was he trapped in the rubble? This was not an easy question to answer. My family hoped that Leonard had survived, that he was one of the people that were okay. We did not hear from him that day, nor did we hear from the police. My brother's friends took action and began posting missing pictures of Leonard all around New York City. These pictures were found in Union Square, Bellevue Hospital, the Armory, the Cantor Fitzgerald headquarters, Greenwich Village, anywhere. For me, those posters meant that he was missing, and that's what it seemed like. He was missing, not dead. I drew comfort from those posters. It meant he might be found. I truly thought that if anyone could survive this, he could. And as I watched and experienced the unimaginable, I led a parallel life where I tried to take care of my 2 children and make mom decisions, such as whether I should take my son to soccer practice that night. My husband and I knew we had to go back to Buffalo, New York, which is where our families were. I'm remembering, what do I pack? Do I pack for a funeral? For a reunion? What was I going home to? I'm not sure what I decided. I just know that we packed up the car and we left on the 13th. 2 grueling days in the car. My most vivid memory is driving, and this interstate was empty. There were no planes in the sky. It was just smooth sailing. It was one of the oddest feelings. The first year was incredibly difficult. I often wonder what happened during the 102 minutes it took before the second tower fell. In the days and weeks following 9/11, the following thoughts were ever present. What were people doing to get out of the building? I felt an overwhelming desire to know what's going on at the World Trade Center site known as Ground Zero. How many bodies have they found? Have they found any from my brother's floor? Have they found my brother? Will they find him? How hot are those fires burning? What's it like to be at ground zero and be a part of the recovery process? I want to stay connected. I somehow feel if I know what's going on, I will have a connection with my brother somehow. I want to know if he was alive when the building collapsed. I want to know what he knew about the other tower and what was happening within his own building. Did he have any idea that his tower might collapse? I want to believe he wasn't panicked. I want to know whether he was with friends, whether there were people comforting each other. I want to believe he went peacefully. What I really want, though, is for him not to have been in that building that day. Here we are 10 years later, and we have no remains of my brother, and no personal effects of his were found. Our journey that first year is filled with images and experiences that are both peaceful and upsetting. My family made the pilgrimage to New York City the week of the 17th. Our first stop was to the Cantor Fitzgerald headquarters, where they had rented out rooms at the plaza. This is where our journey began. We went to the plaza on that day, and we saw hundreds of names and pictures of those employees who had not been found. A huge board held the dates and times of funerals that were scheduled. And I remember thinking, how did the families know that they were gone, that they wouldn't be found? At that time, I truly did believe that there was a possibility that my brother was in one of the miracle tunnels they talked about. I don't know if you remembered at that time, but they were talking about the miracle tunnels where there were air pockets and possibly food and water. We then went to Pier 94, which is a large building that was dedicated to helping the families of 9/11. And that's where their headquarters were set up. We stopped there. At that time, we received a number which would forever identify the remains of my brother with us. And we met with the detectives. The detectives asked my parents for samples of their DNA, which could be used to possibly identify my brother. We then met with the mental health counselor and spent the entire day going through counseling. In October, there were memorial services at Ground Zero. This memorial service was held near the burnt-out shells of the building and where the fire still burned. I don't know if any of you remember that, but that was the first memorial service held at Ground Zero. In October as well, my family had arranged for us to go for a private viewing of Ground Zero. A couple of images that I'd just like to share with you from that time is they allowed families to go on site to a viewing platform. As you approach Ground Zero, one of the things that you don't often hear about is the reverence with which that site remained. As we approached the grounds, the National Honor Guard was present at the site, and as the families approached, they snapped to attention. And when the families went to the viewing platform, the workers who were working at Ground Zero, who were in the construction zone, stopped their work. They stopped what they were doing, took off their hard hats, and put them over their hearts for the time period that the families were there. During this time, too, I was finding Nebraska connections. Other people in Nebraska that had lost a sibling or daughter. Also came in contact with the Lincoln Urban Search and Rescue. I don't know if anyone here is from that crew, but this group went out to New York City, and they were out there on day 8. That was the last day that this was considered a rescue mission. On day 9, it turned into a recovery mission. And we spoke to Lincoln Urban Search and Rescue, and they told us about that day and how they were bound and determined on that last day of rescue to find someone in the rubble. They didn't. In April of 2002, my mother, my sister, and I had a pilgrimage to New York City where we had the pleasure of doing many things that I had never thought that I would do. We went to the medical examiner's office, and I don't know if many people are aware of this, but the medical examiner's office was full of volunteers from all across the country who had come to volunteer their services to help ID our loved ones, dentists who had volunteered, medical examiners who had volunteered. They showed us where the remains were kept, and the remains were kept in 18 refrigerated trailers, and they were under a tent, and they referred to this as the memorial tent. And every Friday, they told us they had a non-denominational service at these trailers where they would remember everyone who died that day, and they would have different people come in and say prayers and sing and somehow find some sort of sanity in an unsanitary place. It's not an insane place, I'm sorry. We also went to the Fresh Kills landfill. The Fresh Kills landfill, this is where they were taking all the debris from Ground Zero and taking it to the landfill. And when it went to the landfill, they were sifting through everything that came their way. I have vivid memories of watching these policemen and women in their hazard suits and painstakingly sifting through everything that was coming through. And they sifted each segment 3 times, and when they found something, anything, it went onto a conveyor belt. What they were looking for were personal effects or for bone fragments so that our loved ones could be ID'd. This went on for several months where they painstakingly went through every piece of soil from Ground Zero. We had the pleasure of volunteering at the Salvation Army tent where we were able to serve meals to the recovery workers that same weekend. And one of my fondest memories is that there was they were held mass at Ground Zero every Sunday. And we found this out quite by accident. And I don't know if you remember when they found the steel beam cross in the rubble at Ground Zero. Well, we discovered that this steel beam cross was being used at Ground Zero, and they would move it from area to area wherever the work was being done. And they would hold a mass every Sunday for the rescue and recovery workers. And we were invited to go to one of those masses, which we did on the one Sunday that we were there. And mass was held with us looking out towards Ground Zero as all the work was going on. The priest was facing towards us. And it was a very simple mass, and that mass was said in memory of my brother. It is a memory that I will never, ever forget. When we remember 9/11, we remember the victims that died that day. But there were heroes that day as well, both the known and the unknown. The known are the firemen, police, the rescue workers. Those images are burned in our brains as these brave men and women rushed into the burning buildings to help others out of the building, to serve and to protect. We all remember the Flight 93 heroes whose actions had surely ensured that another target would not be hit and prevented further loss of life. There are also the unknown heroes, or the forgotten heroes, the canines of 9/11, all the dogs that were out at the site that were helping to find what we had hoped to be survivors. There were World Trade Center employees who were heroes. Wells Crowther was a man in the red bandana. He was a volunteer fireman working for one of the financial institutions, and he was in the South Tower, and he stayed back, put on his red bandana, and he made sure that most people on his floors and the floors below him made it to safety. He did not make it out. They found his body along with the other firefighters in March of 2002. There was a graduate student who was on his way to school when he saw what happened at the Pentagon. He pulled over and he just started helping. He just ran right in. And then he went to Ground Zero after that. And he spent the next 2 weeks doing nothing but helping. There were the 911 operators. Can you imagine the phone calls that they were receiving during this time period? The thousands of phone calls that they were receiving from people inside the buildings. The people who stayed behind with their friends and coworkers. I distinctly remember reading a story many years ago of a man who stayed behind with his disabled friend. The elevators were not in service. His friend was in a wheelchair and could not get down the stairs. They were pretty high up. And this friend said, "Well, I will stay with you until help comes." And he stayed with him, and help never came. The people who stayed with others, helped others, the people who were with others and went upstairs and not downstairs. We will never know all of their stories. And when we think about the 9/11 heroes, in addition to those that are in the forefront of our minds, the firemen, the policemen, the Flight 93 heroes, I challenge us all to remember the other heroes and their stories whom we never know of. Now I want to take you back again to 10 years ago to another part of September 11th and see things differently. 10 years ago, we saw the worst of people, and we saw the best of people. Do you remember the long lines of people waiting to donate blood? all of the various Red Cross donation sites, all of the volunteers and medical personnel who are willingly volunteering their time at the Pentagon in New York City to help any of the victims from those tragedies, the restaurant workers who were providing meals in New York City for weeks and months at no cost, the Red Cross and Salvation Army volunteers, these volunteers who were at Ground Zero, who were at the Pentagon, people cheering the New York City police and fire along the streets of New York City. The volunteers, which I've already mentioned, who donated their time at the medical examiner's office, and all the notes, angels, drawings, and poems sent to New York City by children around the world. There's a powerful saying the military uses that I'm going to borrow and reframe it for community volunteerism. We are an army of one. All it takes is one person to make a difference in the lives of others through donations of money or time, donations of food or clothing, giving blood, or giving of your time. We will always have new tragedies to focus on, such as hurricanes Irene and Katrina, floodings, earthquakes, other natural disasters. I don't know what it feels like to lose my home or to be evacuated, but I do know what it feels like to be living with uncertainty and not knowing whether your loved one is dead or alive. I know what it's like to feel fear and trauma and to experience anger, bitterness, sadness, and joy all in the same 5-minute period. And I know what it feels like to be supported by my community and know that people are helping and praying for me. We are an army of one. One good deed goes a long way and keeps on giving. My challenge to everyone here is to give to your community in memory of those who died on 9/11. Since 9/11, I have refocused my energy. In honor of my brother's memory, I take each day as an opportunity to live in my life that I think he would want us to. I try to practice random acts of kindness, smiling when I would rather not, being pleasant, helping others in my community and my neighborhood. For me, there were important lessons that have always been out there but now seem more relevant. I learned that we should not take our family for granted. Family is sacred and memories can last for a lifetime. Mine have too. It's all I have left of my brother. That the time we spend now is what our memories are made of. That friendships are precious and should be nurtured and cherished. That we should do what we love because life is too short not to. Life is what we make it. We create our own reality. Honor what's in your heart. And with everything, there's balance. My brother believed in balance. He would exercise like a fiend. He was a great weightlifter. When he was done lifting weights, he would go and eat a package of Oreos. Today, I'm eating Oreos in memory of my brother. We also honor my brother's memory with a scholarship at his high school, and it's not based on grades because I will tell you my brother was not the best student in the world. However, it is based on the characteristics of my brother because he was the most generous person. He would willingly give of his time, of his energy. If you needed something, he was there. He would be the person who would be most likely to help out another person. So the scholarship in his memory is based on characteristics of people and students in the school who carry on the tradition of Leonard. We are not the only family that has established scholarship in our loved ones' names. It's one of the ways that we give back. On behalf of the other families in Nebraska that lost someone on September 11th, I thank you for remembering, honoring those who died that day. And I'd like to take a brief moment and mention the names of those who have a Nebraska connection. The individuals who died on Flight 11, Alex Filipov, Tara Creamer, Lisa Fenn-Gordonston, Robin Kaplan, Susan McKay, Christine Barbudo, Neely Casey, and Linda George. At the Pentagon, Captain Lawrence Daniel Getzford. And at the World Trade Center, my brother Leonard, Julie Geis, Michael Tinley, Michael Finnegan, Montgomery Horde, James Samuel, and Jennifer Dorsey Howley. On behalf of all of us, I thank you for remembering.
Thank you, Lynn.